Good evening. My name is Adriana Hillis, and I am the Rentals and Programs Coordinator at Town Hall Seattle. On behalf of Town Hall staff and Worry-Free Wednesdays, it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's workshop with Kay Longhi and Wendy Norman. As we get underway, I would like to acknowledge our institution stands on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, particularly the Duwamish. We thank them for our continuing use of the natural resources of their ancestral homeland. If you'd like to attend future Worry-Free Wednesday events, join us for our next workshop on March 18th. Town Hall is adding new events to our calendar every day, and you can always find tickets and more information on our website at townhallseattle.org. Town Hall's work is made possible through your support and the support of our sponsors. Town Hall is also a member-driven organization, and we'd like to offer a really big thank you to all the members here with us tonight. If you're not a member yet, please consider joining or donating. Your support helps keep Town Hall a place for everyone. And without further ado, I'm excited to hand it off to Wendy Norman, founder of Worry-Free Wednesdays. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, welcome to all of you here joining us in the room and all of you joining us online from the comfort of your home or your office, maybe a coffee shop. It's always wonderful to open one of these events because I always have a smile on my face and people say, but you're going to talk about dying. And I say, I'm not going to talk about dying. I'm going to talk about quality of life and how to have a good quality of life till the end of life. And that is something to smile about. Some of the people we're going to talk about tonight might not feel that way because they're reluctant to talk about end of life. I came to this journey of this type of healthcare around end-of-life planning because in my own family, we've experienced a lot of Alzheimer's and dementia and a lot of cancer. And through that journey of my life, I saw a lot of people die well, and then I saw one individual die not well, and that was my mom. She was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's at my age. She lived 15 years with the disease, and I have never seen anyone suffer like that. And as she suffered, no one helped us along with the information that we would have at our fingertips to be able to help my mom die well. And it fueled me and gave me a passion to leave my 25-year career at Microsoft and dive deep into this world of end-of-life planning and how to prepare for that chapter of life, whether it's expected or unexpected, and build this organization with people like Kay Longhi, who's here with me tonight. So I'm going to have Kay introduce herself.
Thank you, Wendy. I have been involved in the end-of-life movement for about 24 years. That was a result of my first husband dying. He had what I call a very good death. He was able to hasten his death when he was ready. My second husband, who also died of terminal cancer, did not have a good death. And I learned from both of them. So I am here, and I've worked with the other organization in Washington, End of Life Washington, to help share the information that, along with Wendy, we learned about how to make what is a difficult concept, dying, a lot easier to anticipate and arrange. Thank you.
Thanks, Kay. So our organization is called Worry-Free Wednesdays. A lot of what we do is build resources around education and awareness and meet with individuals in the community at a coffee shop, at their home, over the phone, over Zoom. We do workshops like this, general workshops, A to Z of end-of-life planning. And then we do unique, specifically focused workshops like tonight around reluctant loved ones. We also do an event around dementia that is coming up in just a month here. Everything that I'm going to cover tonight is available on our website. And if you have a packet that we gave you, for those of you joining us online, on our website, on the tab, the page that says checklist and packet, you can download this and look along with us. You can see it. But on the front page is a checklist, and this is sort of these 7 steps that about, I'd say, 100 different professionals and individuals around this space of end of life, hospice workers, clergy, doctors, geriatricians, lawyers, have come together and built this list. If you were going to say, what do I need to be end of life ready and prepared to live worry-free, this would be the list. We're not going to go through this at this workshop tonight, but I wanted you to have this because we're going to refer to some of the documents within it. So we're here to talk about reluctant loved ones. I loved, before we got started tonight, talking to some of you, as a couple of you admitted that you are the reluctant loved ones. So I'd like to applaud and commend you for being here and taking this step to join us. And for those of you online who are coming in through streaming, if you as well are joining us and reluctant, congratulations to you as well for taking this first step. Talking about dying is hard. And what we find when we talk to people is it's not the dying part that seems hard, it's the dying process. It's the process of dying. It's the fear of leaving your home. It's the fear of being in pain. It's the fear of leaving loved ones. It's the fear of navigating through the healthcare system. You know, when people don't want to talk about dying, it's usually the dying process. And so what we're going to talk about tonight is what some of those emotions look like, some of the factors and strategies around those emotions of how to overcome them. And we'll give you some idea of successful strategies that we've heard from individuals that we've met with over the years. Okay, Evan, I'm pressing really hard. There we go. Okay, I'm laughing because I was talking to someone earlier in the audience who said, my mother just does this. And I said, that's actually our first slide. So we do find that when you come up against a reluctant loved one to talk about end-of-life planning as a child, a sibling, a significant other, that some of the things that come up first is just denial. I'm not going to die. Nothing's going to happen to me, so we don't need to do anything. Let's move on. The second thing, as I said earlier, is fear for all those things that I mentioned. The top of the list of fear is moving out of one's home. It's losing control and independence. Control of their life, control of their money, control of their things, their activities, driving. Losing independence, independent thought, independence to make decisions. For those of you who are here, trying to work with a reluctant loved one and you've asked to potentially have some sort of power of attorney to help them and been told no, that is independence. That's the fear of losing independence. For those of you who are managing through people with mild cognitive decline or dementia and they don't want to talk about it, that's the fear of going from talking about it into a memory care home and losing all independence. And so we find these are some of the top areas that people share as we sit with individuals and they're reluctant to plan. The other thing that happens when people get to a stage where they know they need to start planning for end of life, which is really every one of us as adults, because at any day we can be hit by a car or fall and hurt ourselves. There's a lot of confusion and feelings of being overwhelmed. If you go to the doctor and you're going to have a minor surgery, but you're going to be under general anesthesia, they'll say, fill out these advance directives, and they'll hand them to you and send you home. And you don't know what they are, and then the forms start saying, do you want life-sustaining treatment? It's like, oh, I'm just having a minor surgery. I'm just under general anesthesia. What do you mean life-sustaining treatment? And then the fear comes back in, but there's also confusion over what's actually happening. And a lot of time, clinics and hospitals just don't have the time to sit and go through these documents. So confusion sets in, feeling of overwhelmed, and then we go back to denial and fear. All of these things, it's sort of this vicious cycle without the time to work through this. Then there are my favorite customers. These are the ones that are just optimistic. It's all going to be fine. There's no need to plan. Everything's great. I'm super healthy. I'm just going to die in my sleep one night. Do any of you have that individual in your life? this carefree living, and it's wonderful, right? We want to go to lunch with these people, we want to vacation with these people, we want to spend time with them. Do we want to be the loved one left behind after they die? No, because there's probably been no planning, no advanced communication and organization, because it's, again, back to denial, but for a different reason. And then there's some individuals that just want to be unaware. They're not curious about end of life. You know, I could have been one of those people because I watched so many people die from the age of 4, you know, till today, and I have a brother who's living with a degenerative disease, so it's just been a part of the fabric of my life for so long that I'm just very curious. I'm very curious how to die better. I'm very curious how to make these things interesting. There's some people that just aren't because they're carefree living and they're an optimist and they have no intention of bringing up the topic proactively with any of their loved ones. So those are the reluctant loved ones, and then there's us. There's those of us who are going to be on the receiving end of these people when they become ill or when they die. And these are people we love and we so badly want to take care of and have all the best of intentions. We want to be prepared for that role of decision maker or caregiver. We want to be able to support the needs related to legal and financial, medical, and oh my goodness, insurance. If any of you have spent time helping a loved one on insurance and healthcare, it can take a very long time. To avoid regret or remorse from not knowing the wishes of a loved one. If I had a penny for every time we have heard from the workshops that we do, or the individuals that we've talked to who say, I wish I had known what my mom wanted. I still live with regret. I wish I had known how to help my dad. This is the number one thing we hear around pain after people die because they were put in a situation to make decisions for a loved one and not knowing. So they're in the ICU and they are not able to communicate. They're hooked up to machines and they stand outside in the hall with the doctor and they have no idea what decision to make on behalf of their loved one, even if they're close to this person. A significant other, a parent, a sibling, and in some cases a child. Because how many kids tell their parents what they want? And then mitigating the financial, lifestyle, and emotional burdens. This is where we get into, and we'll talk about it on the next slide, the practicality of some of this. If you have a job, if you have a family, if you have a lot of extracurricular, interesting things you do with your life, sometimes those things can be cut in half or in a quarter by a loved one who is ill, who needs you, who didn't prepare, and your time spent cleaning up the chaos or navigating through the healthcare system. And what happens is when that person dies or when that person's ailing and needs you, this resentment starts festering because you're so frustrated that you are taking away from your children on a Saturday or can't go home for dinner, or you have to leave a work event you wanted to be in because you're getting a phone call, and because of the lack of preparation. And so instead of this beautiful moment to care for a loved one, there's anxiety and resentment that builds. And that's the piece we really hope by planning ahead that we can move past, because that's the sad part. So there are some strategies that have been shared with us that we thought we'd start here today on this list of 8 things and give you some just simple ideas around these. And then we're going to take the rest of our session to walk through some scenarios. Kay and I are going to do a little role play and get some feedback from you and let you ask some questions, as well as online. You can do that right online, and we'll get them through Leslie, our director tonight. But we wanted to start here with some of the things that, if you think about the tips and tricks of overcoming those that are reluctant to plan, this is where it starts. So I will hand it off to Kay to get us going here.
Thank you, Wendy. So start small and make it relatable. Instead of diving directly into the topic, Mom, what are you going to want when you die? Talk about things that can ease into the conversation. Talk about wills or estate planning as something everybody needs to follow through on to ensure their wishes are acknowledged and respected. Discuss examples of other people, such as a friend who recently had to deal with the loss of a family member or a friend and who hadn't expected it. So start small and make it relatable.
And then another idea, this is where we see people do this very right or very wrong. There seems to be no gray area. It's like where their emotion lies, is choosing the right timing and environment. So, the loved one has maybe been told that they have to move out of their home, and instead of just staying narrow on that topic and talking about, okay, where can we move you to live? Yes, you have to go to rehab, maybe to assisted living. They add on all the wonderful things about where would you like to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? And how? And the whole list, the checklist on the front of this packet begins. And so it's really important to think about, is your loved one at a place where they're not distracted, they're calm? You think they could be receptive to this conversation? You'll hear in a minute, we're going to role play where a daughter and a mother have just been at a funeral. And believe it or not, that actually is interesting timing because you're feeling emotions for the person you've gone to the funeral for, so you can potentially relate it to your own feelings. So that is a very good strategy, is to think about the environment and the timing around when your loved one will be most receptive to this conversation, and look for opportunities where the conversation doors might open to that.
The third one has to do with expressing personal feelings and concerns. This is where it helps to articulate what you're worried about and what you care about in respect to your family member or your friend that seems to be avoiding talking about the issue. My mother, as an example, I would say to Mother, I'm worried. I know you have an advance directive, but it's not very specific. I'm really worried about what you might want. And she said, well, just like my mother and father, I am going to go to bed one night and just not get up in the morning. And since that happened to both of her parents, she was logical to think that it could be how she was going to die. And I said to her, Mother, I don't look forward to walking into your bedroom and finding a cold body there. I want us to start talking now about what is probably more likely going to be a less neat way to die. So talk about how you care about the individual that is not particularly looking forward to helping you with the period when that person can't speak for themselves.
This is one of my favorite, is framing talking about end of life as a practical step. And starting, again, choosing that timing and environment. If a loved one has a pet, that is one of the best places to start talking about end of life. What would you like me to do with Toby, the cat, if and when you die? Because there's a love with that animal and a connection, assuming your loved one loves the animal, then Toby, Toby, well, I want it to go to the neighbor, or I want you to take, or definitely the grandchild to have. The conversation about, then they begin planning. Oh, okay, you've walked through the door. They're talking about Toby the pet. Say, well, you've built such a beautiful garden. Would you like me to have your rose bushes done? Would you like me to give those to anyone as well? Unplant, start with things they love in a very practical way of, you're not going to, it's imminent, we're all going to die unless the loved one you have is totally in denial. But if you begin with things they love and talk about a practical, Mom, actually, there are some expenses that go along with the kind of gathering that I know you've said you wanted, or a funeral like we had for Dad. Do you have a whole body life insurance plan with a few, have you ever bought a plot? Have you made a decision? No, I haven't. Okay, well, gosh, if I'm a co-signer on your checking account with you, then I can go ahead and take care of all those arrangements. So instead of sitting down and saying, hey, Mom, I want to be a co-signer on your checking account, it's going through sort of starting with the practicality of something that you know is near and dear, and then moving into other things while they're on that, that trajectory of talking about practical items that they see as logical without talking about death. That can be a very helpful strategy.
The next way is to offer to help, help with the process. Because the process can seem, as Wendy said earlier, just overwhelming, and it's easier to avoid even thinking about it. So volunteer to help with the process. Suggest that you know about an organization that offers information sessions to help you get started, like Worry-Free Wednesdays. Offer to bring in the neighbor who just dealt with a financial situation and learned a lot from it when her family member died, and have that individual talk to your loved ones. It has to be in a way where you are offering assistance, not laying it out like this is what we're going to do. So offer assistance in ways that you think will get to what they consider is the most overwhelming aspect.
Another helpful strategy, and you have to be very careful with this one, is using media, articles, podcasts, movies, and external resources to make a point that you're trying to make and have not been successful making. So let me give you an example. My mother had Alzheimer's, my grandfather had Alzheimer's, and when the movie Still Alice came out, everyone kept sending it to me saying, you should watch this. And it was interesting because I'd had this really difficult journey with my mom, and I was still in a pretty sensitive place about it. I've still not seen the movie. Too close to home for me, too hard to watch on screen, and I didn't need it because I had my own personal experience. That's a hard movie for someone that is just experienced or might even be in mild cognitive decline. However, there are some beautiful books and beautiful movies about sort of relationships related to dementia that are much, again, I haven't seen that movie, Still Alice, but there are some that I have seen around documentaries that are easier to kind of step in to that conversation. And so in using external resources, it can sometimes be helpful, like if your loved one has not talked at all about how they want to dispose of their body after they die, you could send them and say, hey, did you hear about organic reduction called human composting? I don't know what I think about this. My neighbor said she wouldn't want worms crawling all over her body. Like, make it funny, add some humor, but you'll start a conversation of, oh, no, I don't like that, or I love that idea, I love being a part of the earth. Then that leads you to, okay, do you already have a funeral home or a reduction facility decided upon? Well, no, I don't. Do you want to go visit some? So sometimes you can use those things to spark, if you know your loved one well enough, you can use those things to spark interest and curiosity, and then keep, again, going down the pathway to what you actually want, which is to make sure it's paid for, to understand what they want, and that funeral home plan is set. Again, many people go in with those documents and say, we need to choose a funeral home, we need to choose how you want to die, and very unsuccessfully walk away with nothing on that piece of paper. So sometimes you can just trigger with information.
I think the next one is really hard. To be patient and non-judgmental. Here we are trying to do something really wonderful for that friend or that loved one, and they're just not listening. They're not cooperating. And we want them to, partly because we're going to be left with all the hard work that results when they don't plan ahead, or because we care so much about them. We really want to help them. I live on Vashon Island. It's a relatively small community, and I do this kind of program quite regularly on the island. People will come up to me in the grocery store, and they'll immediately say when they look at me, "Oh, I haven't started yet." It happens wherever I am. And I have learned to say, I know it takes time. And when you're ready, give me a call and we'll walk through it again. Now, that's easy for me to say because I'm not going to be there to pick up the dregs after that person dies. But to recognize your own emotion, what's causing me to be so uptight about this, and appreciating that emotion will help you to continue to be non-judgmental and accepting of the process that they're trying to work through.
Yeah. The other thing to add to that, and you'll see in some of the role play that we're going to do, is it's very difficult not to react when a loved one says something that you find either outlandish or not helpful. And it's very easy to argue or to make a different point versus just saying, "Thank you for sharing." I'm sure that's hard. I understand that. If any of you have been through any kind of therapy or psychology training or anything, you know the I message versus the you. But always starting with "I can imagine," "Thank you for sharing," in this space, especially with people who are fearful, versus judging their, "What do you mean you don't want to have a funeral? What do you mean you don't?" Which is where we tend to sometimes go. The final strategy that's worked very well is leading by example. I was talking to someone ahead of getting started tonight, and she was explaining that she's here as well for herself, just knowing that she needs to get her plans together, as well as both her mother and her mother-in-law. And the best way sometimes to do this is to sit down, if it's a parent or a sibling you're dealing with, is to sit down and say, "Hey, I just want you to know that I'm on the road a lot. I'm driving around a lot, and if I get hit by a car, I realize that, I'm not married, and I realize that you need to know what I want. You need to know what decisions I would want made, or you need to know what to do with my affairs after I die. So I've put together a will, and I've put together some advance directives, and I've communicated them, I've shared them with the hospitals, I've done this, and by doing that and taking the step, sometimes that loved one, especially when it's a parent, it can create a little bit of motivation to do the same thing, or as they start asking questions, you are educating them at the same time. So that can be a very helpful strategy. So what we're going to do now, we're going to walk through 3 of these little role play. These are real conversations that have happened through clients of ours that we're just retelling with different names, and just to sort of share. And what we'll do after is ask you if you're interested in commenting or you have a question about them. Leslie will come by, just raise your hand. She'll come with the mic so the folks joining us online can hear as well. And you'll have a chance to let us know if this is true to form or if you have any questions about how this goes. All right. My name is Susan. I am unaware that I am starting to forget things. But to me, it feels like the same old memory issues I've had all my life. I am not aware that it's actually become a real problem.
My name is Nancy. I'm concerned about my younger sister's memory and worried that she has early-onset Alzheimer's. She's been forgetful lately and missing appointments and meetings. I'm worried about her and feel responsible if something happens to her and someone else when she's driving.
Did you hear that George Nelson has been diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's?
I did. How did that make you feel?
It makes me so sad for he and Judy. He's such a lovely man, and it's such a hideous disease. No dignity left at the end.
Yes, that's a very tough disease. Stan and I were pretty moved by it. It worried us a bit. We sat down last week and filled out our dementia directive.
Wow, that seems like a little overkill, doesn't it? You don't even have any memory issues.
Well, that's the point. You will fill out these documents before you have any signs of memory loss, Susan.
I think you can worry about these things when the time comes. It's not like you lose all capacity overnight.
Yes, but what about a stroke or an injury? What about cognitive impairment? Isn't always about dementia or Alzheimer's. Cognitive impairment can come at any point.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Hey, did you hear about George Nelson? He was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. It's really too bad that Judy died and can't take care of him.
I think that might be someone else you were thinking of that lost their wife. I think George's wife, Judy, is still with us.
That may be. I thought she died. Anyway, it's sad for George.
How do you feel like we're doing with our memory as we age?
I think we're doing pretty well.
When you say pretty well, Susan, do you feel like anything has changed?
No, not really.
I feel like I've noticed some changes in your correspondence with me and your memory.
You do?
Yes. It feels like there are things forgotten more often. And I'm seeing a change in caring for your house and yourself as part of your daily routine.
Oh, Nancy is nothing. We've talked about this. I'm just forgetful as I've always been. You know, I have a lot on my mind all the time.
I do know that. I do know that you have a very busy and full life. It just feels to me like your behavior is different.
You don't need to worry about me. I got here just fine today. I remembered the restaurant, the time. See? Proof. I'm just fine.
Susan, actually, you were 30 minutes late.
I was? I was here right at 12:30.
We were meeting at noon. And you called me 2 different times this morning to confirm this.
I don't remember that.
Yes, I didn't want to make an issue when you got here because I was hoping to talk to you about this over lunch. And then you brought up George, which seemed like such a helpful coincidence. I thought maybe you were going to raise the issue with me.
Raise what issue? I don't have Alzheimer's. I'm just forgetful.
Well, Susan, I don't really know what's going on. It does feel to me your behavior is different and your memory has declined.
Well, I'm sure it has, but again, I got here today, right? And I'm at the right restaurant.
Yes, I'm not saying you can't function. I'm just worried that you have mild cognitive impairment. It might not be safe for you to be living at home alone or driving. And because I know this, I feel responsible if anything happens to you or someone else.
You won't be responsible, and I feel like you're blowing this out of proportion. I'm just forgetful.
Well, maybe I am, but part of what Stan and I did is set markers for each other. So we would know when our behavior shifted enough that it wasn't safe to be living at home without assistance or driving. What if we did this to you? So then you could see how things may be changing.
Set markers for how I live, but I live alone. Who would know that things had changed?
We could make a list, and then we could keep track of how it's going. I could help by checking in more and visiting more frequently.
Is this what you and Stan are doing?
Yes, exactly. And then when we get concerned, we'll talk to our doctors about it.
No, we are not talking to any doctors. I don't trust doctors. They don't have enough time to find out what's really going on. They'll just say something's wrong with me when it isn't, and then they'll tell me to go to a memory care home and put me on hospice, and I'll rot. No.
Is this what concerns you?
Yes, I'm not going to live out my final days that way, and I don't want some 10-minute appointment to define it and put me in the crazy farm. No.
I understand. Susan, this is why maybe just us sitting down and talking about what you want, like Stan and I did, would be helpful so we can make sure to follow your directions if you need us.
Well, I might consider this, but no doctors. I trust you. If you say you've seen changes, maybe there are. So that is a real story between two sisters who met and was very successful, and they came to us after that conversation. Sorry, it's a little long, but it was important to kind of walk you through that dialogue. Because at the end of the day, Nancy got what she wanted. She got Susan to agree. And so we wanted you to kind of see that progression. It was the constant understanding, it was the lack of judgment, it was sharing how she felt, and it was also leading by example. Leading by example of what Stan, the initial reaction from Susan was, wow, that's overblown. And by the end, she's sort of willing to take that on. So I'd love to hear from you in the audience, or if anyone's provided questions online, if you have any questions about that scenario or thoughts. Anyone have anything to share?
I love the idea about the markers. Can you give a couple of examples, like maybe getting into more car accidents or not paying your bills or whatever? Because sometimes you are on a path of decline and you don't really know you are, but if somebody said, hey, this is happening, this is happening. So can you give some examples of those markers? Thank you.
Thank you for asking that. It's a great question. I know everyone could hear it and see it. Do you want to start?
We know of a couple. This is a real story. She was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. And she wanted to be prepared when the Alzheimer's became serious to consider options for her future. And she and her husband agreed that one of her regular nighttime activities is putting on lotion. It makes her feel good. It's something her mother taught her. She did it every single night. But when her husband noticed that she wasn't putting on the lotion, he told her the next morning, remember, this is one of the markers that we determined between us, that I would call to your attention.
Another marker that couple set was walking the dog in the morning. It was her favorite thing to do. About a few months after the lotion, she forgot to walk the dog. She stopped brushing her hair. The markers were part of daily active living. They weren't things like driving and getting in a car accident. They were more seeing that personal hygiene or personal care or things that were really close to the heart or things that were very comfortable were being forgotten. And those were the markers that they chose. Some people, like my father's 87, and he stopped driving at night all by himself, which I think is wonderful that he's made that decision, not because of an accident or anything that's happened, but he's worried that he's become forgetful. So he's setting his own markers. Maybe it's because he has a daughter that he knows is in this space and he feels like he's going to get in trouble if he doesn't, but probably not. But so it's really personal, but it is good to do with a friend if you live alone, to have someone check in. It's good to do with a child, a sibling, a parent, someone that can check in and just know, are these sort of part of your daily active routine, are these being missed? And that, in this case, Nancy had been seeing that with Susan.
My mother died ultimately of dementia, so I worry a lot about dementia. So I have thought about making cue cards that say, time to stop driving, with my signature at the bottom. And my niece lives next door to me, and I've thought about giving my niece these cue cards so she doesn't have to feel like she's confronting me with anything. She's just holding up the cue card. Now, whether I remember that I wrote that cue card or not is another matter. But for people who are worried about, am I slipping and I don't know it, and is there something I can do about it, preparing in advance, it's very helpful to have these kind of markers.
Another question here in the back?
Regarding something like that, what if they don't accept the fact, it's like you said, well, I didn't sign that, or you made me sign it? How do you deal with issues of sort of refusal to acknowledge that these markers were set and agreed to at a time when they were a little more cognizant?
We're going to talk in a minute about dementia directives. And these are documents that if someone is willing to fill out with you, a loved one, before cognitive impairment begins, or even mild cognitive decline, if they're willing to do that, we often suggest writing these things down, signing, as Kay has said, but also the best way to do that today is a video. To just say, hey, can we just make a little movie of you, a little, a vignette of you talking about this with me so I can play it back to you and you can see. And we hear from families who share with us that, especially with dementia or at that late stage of cancer when there's some cognitive decline sometimes, those videos are very helpful. And just seeing themselves saying it, it's a really good reminder. Okay, one more question, yeah. Oh, 1 second, sorry.
Just to clarify what you were saying just now, a video of them talking about what?
They're markers.
They're
so,
markers. Okay.
when my family, so maybe I would say, when my family tells me that I need to stop driving because they have noticed that I backed into the garage and I ran over the cone and some people are very funny about it, but I need to stop driving and get out of my car and hand the keys to my daughter. I've seen a couple of these. Some of them are very whimsical and fun. Some of them are serious. But these markers are really, people call them all sorts of different things, indicators, stages. We just call them markers because I think they are sort of a mark in time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And we'll talk about in a minute with voluntarily stopping eating and drinking, which is a way that some people choose to end their life when they are struggling and suffering at the end. They stop eating and drinking. And with that, we really suggest that people choose to do videos so that they can see what their choice was. But we'll talk about that in a minute. We'll come back to that. Okay, another great way to have a discussion and start a discussion, all those strategies we talked about, some of those things we talked about are around quality of life. So when you're talking about end of life, often you're talking about quality of life. What does it mean to you? What's important? And what's important to you till the end that is a value that is part of what brings you joy, makes you happy, and you want to sustain through end of life. And if you can't sustain that joy and that quality, what do you want me to do as a loved one? So in the back side of your checklist in that packet, and for those of you online, if you've downloaded the packet, you can see it's called the values checklist or values worksheet. And this values worksheet basically walks through topics. If any of you have played those games where you pick a card and you say what's most important to you in life, what does independence mean to you, what are your favorite things about home, those kinds of things, and you share around a table. This values worksheet is a great way to have a discussion with a loved one about the things that are important to them. And, as Kay said earlier, you don't just walk in and say, hey, I want to talk about dying, but you can say, hey, I would love to have a conversation about what's important to you at life at this stage. Especially for a couple that's romantically involved. That's really, it's hey, we should really talk about, what's important to us. And as we think about life, whether it's we're 30 years old, 40 years old, it could get run over by a car tomorrow, or we're aging, what's important to us and in life, and if something happened to our health, how would we want to think about sustaining life or potentially not sustaining life? And so this values worksheet is a great place to have this discussion. If you've ever painted a wall, it's kind of like a primer. And a couple of things I'll call out here you can see. One of the questions here is the value of being independent. And we talked earlier about losing independence and control being such a high factor. I can understand why. But to some people, independence means physically walking, hiking, going to the grocery store, feeding themselves. To me, because I have been so influenced by dementia in my life, it's this. Being independent to me is how I think, how I can communicate. And so I would answer that question to my loved ones as what's really important to me is being able to have this working. If everything from here down isn't working, that's okay. I can be in a wheelchair. I can wheel around. I can take the special, car. I can do all those things, but as long as I can think and communicate. Aging in place, what does that mean to some people? Does that mean absolutely staying at home? Or does that mean moving ahead of time and then staying somewhere where there's assistance available? So having the different discussion around these things and doing a double click and a triple click and a quadruple click down to really get to the heart of what some of these mean. A lot of the couples that we meet with, this is where we start. We have a conversation and realize the people that have lived together for 20, 30, 40 years, they don't know this about each other. And it's a great place to start when they start answering questions like, do you want CPR if you have a heart attack? In doing this work around a values worksheet, it's really helpful to go through specific scenarios. If you're at home and you have a heart attack, or if you fall and hurt yourself, what would you want me to do? Do you want me to call 911? Do you want to be resuscitated? Do you want life-sustaining measures taken? If you're in the ICU and you're hooked up to machines and a ventilator and a feeding tube, what would you want? No, I don't want any of those things, someone might say. And then, related to cancer, dementia, ALS, heart disease, these degenerative diseases that people live with, this is an important conversation because quality of life with a degenerative disease often shifts, either dramatically with things like ALS, a little slower sometimes with dementia, and with cancer, depending on the severity of the cancer, people have other options that we'll talk about in a minute around medical aid in dying. So it's really important once you understand this, if the loved one is willing, try to kind of walk through that door a little further into some scenarios around the actual things that could happen to their health and what choices they would want you to make. I always like to show this slide at every event we do because this is about leading by example again. If you, as the loved one dealing with someone who's reluctant, come in, one of the things you can say is, hey, the third leading cause of death in the United States for adults is unintentional injuries. So I'm doing this work too. I'm thinking about it too, because this could happen to me. I'm not just putting this all on you because you're old. Okay, so once we've had these conversations, if the loved ones have come around, giving you information, you know where they stand, there are a unique set of documents that help give you control of helping that loved one and making decisions for them. In our other workshops, we go into great depth around these documents. We don't have the time tonight to do that because we're focusing more on these strategies. But we wanted to just raise them briefly so you know what they are. One of these documents is called an advance directive. And an advance directive is really two things within it. It is a durable power of attorney for healthcare, and this is in your packet right next to the values worksheet. It's the next page. This gives you the opportunity to assign someone to communicate you if you can't communicate for yourself, and a healthcare directive, which is also referred to as a living will. And this is the roadmap for the durable power of attorney to know what to do. This says, can you communicate for me if I can't communicate for myself? And this says, here's what I want you to do. This also tells an emergency room, if your durable power of attorney cannot be reached or your alternate, it tells an emergency room what you would want. So these are advance directives. If you go to have surgery, they're going to ask you for them, especially if you're under a general. They want to know who to call, and they want to know what you'd want if something goes awry. You can sign these in front of the presence of two witnesses who are not related to you by blood or marriage or work for an independent or assisted living community, and you can have them notarized. And then they become valid legal documents. Now, I'm going to have Kay, again, we do go into much more depth on these in other sessions, but I'm going to have Kay briefly talk about the role of the healthcare advocate, because in many cases that might be you in this room, or those of you who were so courageous to admit that you are the reluctant planner. This is to think about who you would choose to be your durable power of attorney for healthcare.
As Wendy explained, it's really, really important to have someone who you trust, to speak for you if you are cognitively unable or if you are in a coma or have lost consciousness. And this is because doctors often think they know what's best for you. And if you have someone you have designated as your durable power of attorney for healthcare, they have authority to speak for you over and above what a doctor may recommend. So you want someone who you can trust and who can be assertive. So when that doctor walks up and he's dressed in white and he's got a whole bunch of other doctors surrounding him, and he suggests that your sister get a feeding tube and be hooked up to a respirator, you know that the person you've designated as your durable power of attorney will say, no, I know she doesn't want that. So your durable power of attorney must be someone who's 18 years or older, someone who is easily reachable. Now, that may be someone in your neighborhood, or it could be someone who constantly has their cell phone with them and happens to live across the country. Doesn't matter. It's someone who you have talked to about your advance directive and your health care document, so they're fully appraised. It's someone who is strong enough to speak for you and represent you. We do suggest that if you're going to ask a loved one to be your durable power of attorney, that that individual is someone who has the strength to recommend something that that person might disagree with. If it means turning off the respirator for his wife he's had for 50 years, that may be a difficult decision. So you may look around for a minister, a good friend, someone else.
Thanks, Kay. Those documents can, advance directive, you can make copies of, share with the clinic, share with your nearby hospital, share with loved ones, those that need it. And as you change them, if you want to make changes to them, you always can, and just provide new copies. This is called a POLST form, a portable order for life-sustaining treatment. This is the number one thing that we hear that children think their parents need and parents don't want, because this means I'm ready to die. It's a doctor, that's what they think. Just like when someone says hospice, they think, oh, that means you think I'm going to die. There are trigger words. POLST happens to be a trigger word. This is a medical form signed by a doctor that says, that gives an order to emergency personnel, medical personnel, to give full treatment, throw everything at the kitchen sink at my mother because I want her, she says she wants to live, she told her doctor that's what she wants, doctor checked that box, doctor signed it. Or selective treatment. This is somewhere in the middle between full treatment and no treatment, meaning I live with a degenerative disease, there are some things I do want, some things I don't want, maybe don't hook me up to machines in this, but do this. And that's a conversation with a doctor and writing to the side that gives an indication. And then there's comfort-focused treatment. And this is, I'm ready to die, I'm 88 years old, I'm living with a degenerative disease, I want this form because I want to go peacefully, and when my heart stops, just let me go. Do not do CPR, do not resuscitate me. So this is a very powerful form. It can be folded up and put in a handbag, a backpack, a back pocket, at the grocery store, anywhere. You can make copies, you can travel with it. In some states, it's called a POST form, physician's order for scope of treatment. It can be in pink, yellow, green. It's often put on the freezer. This is a very interesting, contentious document because without advance directives, without a POST form, if something happens to your loved one or to you, and you're rushed to the emergency room, this is the order in which an emergency room legally will make decisions and look for information and communication. First is a named guardian. Second is a spouse or significant other. Third is the adult children. Parents, then we go down the list, siblings, grandchildren. But some of these have an asterisk next to them, which means that all of those parties have to agree. So if you're 40 and do not have any children or are not married, and you're single and you have parents who are still living and something happens to you and the parents are called, both of them have to agree what happens. So this is where, in talking to reluctant loved ones, it can be very helpful to say, hey, just so you know, all 4 of us kids have to agree on what happens to you if something goes wrong. So if you don't want to be given life-sustaining treatment, you better tell Mary over there, because she is going to hook you up. So this is obvious. Remember we talked about practicality? And this can be a very practical step that people want to take to assign their advance directives, because they want to make sure that decisions are made the way they want them made. We started a little bit late, so we're going to walk through one more scenario. We might cut the third one just for timing.
Yep.
But we're going to walk through one more that sort of deals with this very incident. Okay. I think you are the mother. I'm sorry, the apathy and fear.
Yep. Okay. My name is Maggie. I am 88 years old and I live alone. I lost my husband 3 years ago. I have arthritis and I don't like the way I look. I feel that no one will miss me when I'm gone, and I'm just ready to be done with it. I'm ready to die.
My name is Sarah. I am 45 years old. I have a brother named David. I am just returning from a funeral I attended with my mom for our family friend, Charles. What did you think of the funeral, Mom?
Oh, it was all right, as funerals go. They're all the same.
Really? In what way?
Well-
What do you mean they're all the same?
Well, you know what I mean.
I really don't. I don't know what you mean.
Well, it's just a bunch of people sitting around that have better things to do than waste a whole afternoon crying and talking about a person who's dead. They're gone. That's all we need to know. Everyone just needs to move on.
Huh? I didn't know you felt this way. Did you feel this way about Dad's funeral?
Oh, no, because you and your brother needed closure.
Is that the only reason you had a funeral for him?
Yes. Well, and also because he was beloved. Everyone wanted to be there and celebrate him.
And how is that different from other funerals or families that gather?
Well, maybe it isn't, but I don't like them. And I certainly don't want one.
You don't.
No, I don't want anything. No gathering, no funeral. Just bury me next to Dad. You all can stand around and watch me being laid into the ground if you want. It'll probably be raining. But then go and have a pizza. That's all. No fussing over my death.
Pizza. Okay. Well, I'm glad you're sharing this. It's helpful to know. Do you feel that all of us and your friends wouldn't want to gather to celebrate your life?
No. I'm old and most of my friends are gone. No one needs to waste hours retelling stories about me. Just go for pizza.
Okay, pizza it is. This is really good we're having this conversation. It makes me realize, Mom, that I've ever actually asked you, what would you want us to do if you had a stroke like Charles did?
Nothing. Don't do anything. Just let me die.
So you don't want any life-sustaining treatment?
Right. No shock to my heart. I don't want to live on machines. Just let me die. I'm ready. I've been ready.
Do you feel ready to die because your quality of life has changed?
Well, that doesn't take a genius to figure out. Look at me. I'm an old rag doll.
Well, I think you're beautiful, Mom, and you're just normally aging.
Aging? More like falling apart.
Well, I'm sorry you feel that way. So does your doctor know that you want no measures taken to extend your life?
No, but she knows me.
So you've talked to her about this then? She's documented this in some way?
No, but she knows me.
Well, I'm glad that you feel like you can trust that she knows what you want. But what happens if something goes wrong and your doctor can't be reached? How would paramedics or a hospital know what to do if you got hurt at the grocery or out for dinner?
Well, I assume somebody would call you or call your brother.
And what if we don't answer the phone?
You will, eventually.
Well, okay, I hope that'd be the case, but if we don't, have you assigned someone to be your healthcare agent or communicate for you as your proxy?
I don't know what that is. You and your brother will figure it out. Which one of you can be reached is the first one.
Well, Mom, I think the way it works is that you need to actually assign someone, otherwise they have to reach both me and David, and believe it or not, we have to agree. And I actually don't think David's gonna have an easy time honoring your wishes for no treatment.
Well, of course he won't. He'll call the cavalry to come save my life. He's so impractical.
He just loves you, Mom. It's harder for him to let you go.
Well, I don't want him to do that.
I understand. I think the best way to ensure your wish is to be honored is to assign someone to be your healthcare agent. If you want that to be me, we can simply fill out a form, or I can help you choose someone else to be your healthcare agent.
Of course I want it to be you. Do you have the form? I think maybe we should fill that out. But you still have to answer your phone.
So you can see here a few things in overcoming the reluctance here of just sort of apathy of she's ready to die. She's lost her husband, probably sad, and her fear, you can hear early on, is around people might not come to her funeral. People may not be there to celebrate her life. And that's probably the root cause of what's going on here. It's really interesting that early on, sort of the timing, the relatability of going to a funeral, the daughter sort of moved in, and Sarah moved in to take advantage of this opportunity with no judgment early on about not wanting a funeral. You know, the talking about her husband was beloved, you know, understandably maybe thinking I wouldn't be. And then when, you know, the daughter says pizza's okay, that's reinforcing, building trust in the conversation, and also moving on to curiosity. Why do you feel that way? These are really good strategies to use here. And then because the door was open again about Charles's stroke, the gentleman who they went to the funeral for, using that opportunity to again go to the relevance and practicality of, gosh, I actually realized I don't know what you'd want in that situation, and the mom was able to still stay with the conversation, and you can see in the end got the winning result of looking at filling out that form. So any questions about this scenario, this dialogue?
So my mom's in assisted living, and of course, everybody has their pulse on their little mini refrigerator in the
Yes.
room. So of the two legal documents, which one has the higher authority?
The green post form.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but it's kind of vague.
The post form's vague?
Yeah, the third section, comfort care only. Like there's some conditions you would want extended comfort care, and others where, no, it's just like, let's just.
So comfort
Mom,
care
but
only, the interesting thing is I've been asked by someone, well, what if my dad fell in the kitchen and cracked his head open, but he wants comfort care only? I'm not going to let him bleed in the kitchen.
Right.
So you would call 911, and they would secure the situation, make him comfortable, go to the hospital, but not take any extenuating measures to sustain life. So there are scenarios, again, going back to that values worksheet, talking through scenarios where kept comfortable might mean pain medication. Another really good example is a urinary tract infection. A lot of people late with Alzheimer's will get a UTI. My mom had 5 of them. Every time the home care she lived in, they rushed her to the hospital, gave her antibiotics, even though we knew my mom would want to go. We did not know that she could have a post form and the pulse form would say, do not treat. They could have kept her comfortable in the hospital, not given her antibiotics, and she would have passed earlier. So that is a very effective form, but decisions often can be made with family members or a healthcare power of attorney. But if it says comfort measures only, there is no life-sustaining treatment given. It may be that the person might live for 2 or 3 more weeks on hospice, but there's no curative treatment given. If the section C is checked, no treatment.
Okay, so there was a norovirus outbreak in the assisted living, and of course they rushed her to the hospital, my mom to the hospital, because she got dehydrated from diarrhea for 2 days or whatever. And well, norovirus is a virus, so they don't give antibiotics.
They could have kept her comfortable and let her go.
Okay, so I just need to get myself educated about
Yes.
what comfort care, what's under that category.
Yes, what comfort care should mean is no curative treatment. A virus, pneumonia, urinary tract infection, staph infection, anything that could potentially be life-threatening, life-terminating, it's comfort to keep that person comfortable because that person has said, I'm ready to die. Often when people are diagnosed with ALS, Parkinson's diseases, along the journey of those diseases, they get a pulse form because they are living in discomfort and whatever secondary infection or thing that can happen, they're okay with that being their end of life.
Do people sometimes move to Section B from Section
Yes,
C?
absolutely, absolutely. In fact, Kay, do you want to comment briefly on?
My own situation.
Yeah.
I'm 76 years old, so I am supposed to have a pulse form because I'm old. I don't have a pulsed form, which is my fault. But even if I had, if I had a pulse form, I would check off, give me the full treatment. I want everything done for me, because even though I have a chronic medical condition that is going to get worse over time, right now I want to live just as much as one of our characters did, because I feel my quality of my life is good, even though I sometimes have very bad coughing. But as my doctor and I determine that my pulmonary condition is getting worse, I will move down that pulsed form and say, move to the B part that says, not aggressive treatment, but keep me alive. And then there is, finally, I might move to the lower form, lower number, which says comfort care only.
Sometimes people improve in health?
Oh, yes.
Sometimes people improve, and like my mom was suicidal with pain last summer, but they did the surgery on her back, and it really helped. So now her pain is under control. She's having a pretty good quality of life, but
Yeah.
the pulse in her room is checked off on Section C.
Oh, that needs to probably be changed if she wants it changed.
Well, that's what I need to talk to her about.
So one of the things I should have said right up front is why we named our organization Worry-Free Wednesdays is the idea is that you choose a Wednesday once a year, close to your birthday, maybe an anniversary, a holiday you're specifically excited about, and maybe Thanksgiving, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And you take that time to review, update, and reshare your documents if you've made changes. And that's why the idea is then you can live worry-free knowing those things are done. So every June, I sit down with my kids and my husband and say, hey, here's what I still am, I still feel this way, this is what I've changed. In the case of someone who's living with illness and struggling with curative treatment, these forms can change every quarter, they can change within 2 or 3 months, because as someone is being cured, and especially with cancer, we have a gentleman right now who's at stage 4 cancer, he's gone through treatment, he is absolutely checked the box C, comfort only, but man, he's fighting for his life, and he will move it to B as quickly as he can. But right now, that's what he wants. Yeah. Okay. We're going to move on. Thank you. That was a great question. So speaking of apathy and people that are sort of ready to die or living with disease, a lot of times when loved ones can get to a stage where they maybe are willing to talk about end of life, but it's in a very negative way. Just let me die. Just take me out to the woodshed. I'm sure some of you have heard that. I heard that the other day at dinner with a woman standing next to me with 3 of her friends. She said, "Oh, you guys just need to run me over in the driveway." And I was like, gosh, people seem to have these but what happens when people are living with disease and it's terminal, there is an option in our state for medical aid in dying. We have a wonderful organization called End of Life Washington who's very supportive of this option with medical aid in dying. I'm not going to go through all the specifics just because we're running a little bit long on time because we got started late. This is an option for those that are suffering. They are dying anyway. They have been deemed terminal. They are dying anyway, and they can work with their doctor to ask for medical aid in dying. And remember when I talked early on about it's not dying people are afraid of, it's the dying process? This is where medical aid in dying can be very helpful to ease people's anxiety about dying and suffering. And so medical aid in dying is available in our state. The other thing...
He has a question.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the question is that state specific? These is to Washington state. Yeah, Oregon would be a little bit different. So California. If you have a loved one that lives in a different state, to find out if medical aid in dying is available, the restrictions might be different. The other option is voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. And when someone is not terminal, but they are living and suffering, that could be someone with Parkinson's who's not terminal. That could be someone who has earlier ALS and not deemed terminal yet. There's a very interesting line about when someone gets to terminal. But people that are living, like this gentleman, Jeff, with supranuclear palsy, the medicine had sort of lost all of its efficacy. It wasn't working. He was very uncomfortable, a lot of seizures, and he was ready to go. And when loved ones get to that point, the dialogue that you can help with is, are you suffering so much that quality of life is gone and you want to die? And if they say yes, then if you live in a state with medical aid in dying and they're terminal, but if they're not, you can talk to them potentially about voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. The process of this, there's a lot of information on our website. There's a wonderful book about this. But this is an option people can choose, absolutely suggested with the care of palliative and hospice comfort measures so that you can overcome thirst and hunger. But this is a way that some people, when they've really hit a place in life where quality of life is gone and they don't qualify. The word hospice can be a real trigger when talking to loved ones about end of life if they are living with illness. When you go to the doctor, I don't know if you've experienced this or if you've seen, they say, shh, don't tell my dad, don't mention the word hospice. I myself have been a witness to this several times where they say, don't talk about hospice in front of my mom or my dad. Sometimes doctors will come in and talk to the family or the loved ones about hospice right in front without even asking. And to many people, that just means I'm dying. And so the important thing in talking to loved ones about care when ailing is palliative care is basically comfort care, keep you comfortable. And palliative care is available when you're receiving curative treatment. Hospice care is when you are not receiving curative treatment, you've been deemed terminal, and this is care not only for yourself, but also resources for loved ones. And so sometimes a way to deal with needing to bring in hospice care and a loved one saying absolutely not is to say, this is for me. This is for me too. This is not just for you. I need the support. I need the social work. I need the support to help me through being with you as you die. We're going to pass through our scenario because we're running a little bit long. Confronting being overwhelmed. This feeling of being overwhelmed is a big factor if someone isn't reluctant and willing. And this is where, when we talked about the strategies of offering help, this is where you can really have an impact. So we talked about earlier around dementia. If you're worried about a loved one who has cognitive decline, on our website under the dementia category, we have 3 to 4 different dementia directives. And these directives can be very helpful to walk through because it goes through scenarios like, if you had to leave your home, where would you want to go? If you became violent, how would you want us to manage that? If you forgot you were married and you became romantically involved with someone else in the facility, the memory care unit you're living in, how would you want us to manage that? What would you like done with your things, and what would you like brought with you? So as your memory declines, and these documents, one of them 16 pages, so I didn't bring it here for you tonight, but you can download these, you can see these on our website. End of Life Washington has a very good one around sort of mental health decline and thinking through and guiding you as a caregiver or as a loved one how to have these conversations. It's often really helpful as well to bring in a medical professional, a geriatrician, or someone to talk through if you are not making progress. That trust sometimes of a doctor can be really helpful in having these conversations about dementia. In this case, this gentleman named Dennis was really, of all those things we talked about, he was very scared. He had been diagnosed with early dementia, or excuse me, not early onset, but early on the process of cognitive impairment. He was super worried. He didn't want to be force-fed. He didn't want to go to a memory care. He didn't know where to start. His family came in. They brought him to the doctor. They had a conversation with the doctor, and she was able to explain that he could fill out a document that is about voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. Again, it's on our website. You can find it there. But this was for minimal comfort feeding. And so the family was able to work with him through this doctor to get him to a place where he could document to only be given food and water when requested or desired, to not wake for meals or encourage eating, and to have no feeding tube and no forced feeding. And the great thing about this was his biggest worry was late-stage Alzheimer's, and this just calmed him to a place that he could rest easily knowing that he was not going to be forced into any situation. So early on in his Alzheimer's journey, he was given the comfort of knowing he had a document that gave him autonomy and control. The other area around overcoming being overwhelmed is sometimes you can take the step for your loved one to give them the information and do it for them. Some things are very easy to do. We gave you a card tonight, and on the back of that card, you'll see an emergency contact card. So this is the rudimentary physical form of an emergency contact card. Another way to do that, if your loved one has a cell phone, is to put it all in their phone. There's these wonderful health apps. And today, if 911 is called, they know to go into a phone, and you hit the power button and the volume up button, and when you hit that, it says medical ID. And if you swipe the medical ID, all the information is there. So a lot of children we know are doing this for their parents as they carry their smartphone around, because if something happens and 911 is called, the paramedics can get right in. There's also, you can fill out this emergency contact card with which hospital you would like your loved one be taken to, where advanced directives or a pulse form are located, who the healthcare agent is. If that's you, great, but you can fill this out and say, hey, Mom, just put this in your pocket when you go for a walk, when you go out to the grocery store, put it in your glove compartment, have it in your wallet, and then you can take some of those steps. There's also an organization called Smart 911. You can put all of your loved one's information there. There's medical ID bracelets. So there are tools that you can use. If you can't get anywhere, you could potentially fill this all out and just provide it to your family member. In the back of your packet, you have a bunch of what we call after-death forms. And these are forms that we find are often the easiest for families to fill out together, because a lot of it's just very straightforward. Some of it's about what would you like to happen right after you die with the house, again with the pet, with your car. Some of them are about, hey, who do you want mentioned in your obituary? What would you like in your obituary? What kinds of things would you like said? What kind of gathering for life do you want to celebrate your life, or do you not want in the case we heard? So these things can be really helpful. The other thing that we think about with reluctant loved ones is the idea of sharing their passwords, sharing their account numbers, and sharing their information. Very difficult to navigate those things after someone dies if you do not have them. So you can, again, lead by example here. I realize that if something happens to me, my husband or my children have no access into my accounts. I don't know what would happen to my Facebook, my Instagram. You can lead by example here and talk about the social media will that you've put together where you've listed legacy accounts in your social media account. You can sort of lead and show here, maybe even give to the, again, your passwords, your information as you feel comfortable. But getting this information, especially if you're dealing with seniors who are tech savvy, is very helpful in being able to access financial records and those kinds of things. I'm going to move quickly through, but thinking about last will and testament and managing through that versus a trust. It can be very helpful when dealing with parents, if they are willing to, if there are means, if there are assets, to think about, if possible, having a living trust. A living trust enables you to be, as a trustee, part of that process before they die, which makes it when they do die, especially if cognitive impairment comes into play, makes it a lot easier to manage the financial side of affairs. With the last will and testament, there are many online places you can go to do that. We have a couple of them listed on our website without having to hire an attorney for all of the work in that area. You can list all the assets. You can talk about diversification of things, disbursement of special sentimental items. Sometimes people are very willing to have those discussions, but not on the healthcare side. But a trust is something to think about if you are worried about cognitive impairment, because again, that gives you control before the person gets to a place that can no longer make decisions. Again, power of attorney for healthcare we talked about, power of attorney for finance. Being a power of attorney, a lot of people, let's go back to that slide about loss of independence and control. One of the hardest things to get someone to do is hand over control of their finances. To be a power of attorney. So finding a clever way into those conversations is what would happen if something happened to you and you don't have a will and I'm not your power of attorney and I can't help, can't sign for things, I can't manage through with your death certificate and what have you. All of your information will go to probate, all of your means, all of your assets, and then they'll decide how it gets dispersed. Is that okay with you? And sometimes you'll get a no, of course it's not okay with me. Well, then we need to take some steps to get organized. So sometimes, again, back to that practical part, not being morbid, but just, hey, here's what's going to happen practically. Do we need to get organized? This is where some families have provided file folders and labels to their family members to help get them started. And we have some of these. You can print them out on our website, the list, but you can have it printed out on labels. This is really helpful because it kind of forces the conversation and the areas of where you might want to be organized and planful. And in closing, the most important thing in all of this that we've shared is to be patient. Patience is critical in dealing with reluctant loved ones. And then I would say listening for the root cause. We heard in the last scenario, the root cause is really about this sort of apathy, the fear of not being celebrated, not having enough friends to potentially come, not feeling her family wants to celebrate her. It's just, set in maybe depression, apathy. What's the root cause around this? In the dementia scenario, it was doctors, scared of doctors. Do you want to make a couple comments here, Kay?
I think, as I said earlier, to recognize your own motivation in what you're attempting to do with your loved one. And that helps you gain the patience to work and listen well. And once you appreciate what's going on with yourself, your own fear, your own feeling of being overwhelmed. It will help you deal with your loved one's fear and feeling of overwhelm.
Yeah. So we have a few minutes if you can stay for questions, if Leslie has the mic, if you have any questions about anything we've covered. Yes.
I've heard that if they call 911 and you don't have your pulse or something immediately available, even though you've written everything down, like a stranger calls 911, that they have to resuscitate you. Is that correct?
Can I? If you have a pulse and if you're breathing, even if you have "do not resuscitate" written, tattooed on your chest, they will give you CPR. If you call 911, you must be prepared for the fact that even if your loved one has written comfort care only or "do not resuscitate," they will treat you, take you to the hospital, sew up the wound in her father's head, send you home. So I've been asked before, do I have to call 911? And no, you don't have to call 911, but it means watching her father bleed to death. So there is a reason we all turn in panic and pick up the phone and call 911.
But it's an excellent question because people, when they are living with disease, we met a woman who was living with heart disease and she was on a dialysis machine. She was so ready to go. And her son was a very religious man and did not want her to go and wanted all measures taken. And she kept saying to me, I don't understand, because he would want it to be a natural death. Like, it's God's time that I've chosen to go. So for her, religion was a big part of this. And yet his feeling was he wasn't ready to let his mom go. And so she would not go out to dinner anymore. She wouldn't go to the family home because she was so afraid they were going to call 911. And she would be resuscitated, and she just wanted to go. And she kept looking at us what to do. And so we told her to put a sticker on her chest that said "pulsed in purse," because if he called, he'd never know it was there, and then they'd rip her shirt open and see "pulsed in purse" and go get her pulse form, and then there was nothing that the son could do. Even though he was her healthcare power of attorney, that would override him. And we get asked that a lot.
But if you look carefully at the small print on the pulse form, it says, when it asks about CPR, if you have a pulse and if you're breathing, you will receive medical care.
Right. You have to not have a pulse and not be breathing.
Yeah.
Which is why a lot of people don't call 911. They just let their family member.
It's not a question, but you mentioned religion. Years ago, there's a woman named Diane Rehm. She was a speaker. She spoke about, it was one of the first times I'd heard of.
Voluntarily stopping eating and drinking.
Right, and the point was that you don't want to be in a Catholic institution because they won't honor your request to not feed and drink you.
So that's one of the slides I had to take out for tonight, which I wanted to, and we're already long, so there's so much. Please join us again. But yes, especially Washington State now, about 50% of the hospital beds and 50% of the doctors associated with those organizations are restricted from providing the order for medical aid in dying. They are restricted from allowing voluntarily stopping eating and drinking on their premises at a hospital. If someone was hurt and went to the hospital, they will not turn off a pacemaker. No actions can be taken to hasten death at those organizations. So if medical aid in dying is something, or voluntarily stopping eating and drinking is something that you think your loved one or you'd be interested in, you do need to make sure that your doctor will support that and can, because the ethical and religious directives of those organizations.
All of the medical facilities east of the mountains are secular. So if you're going to die, die on this side of the Cascades. It's kind of brutal, but I'm sorry.
That's why we like Kay. She tells it like it is.
Yes, a question for you is, I have a healthcare directive, and what's the difference between that and the pulse as far as priority? If, in other words, if something were to happen to me at my house, my wife, she's my agent or dual, she's the signer on it. Why would you need a pulse form?
Do you want to take that?
No, you go ahead.
So a healthcare directive is like a map for your wife. So if you've sat down with her and said, this is my healthcare directive, this is my living will, this is what I'm saying I want done if I can't communicate for myself. And in it, it talks about your fears, it talks about pain thresholds. Like, for an example, if you were in the emergency room and you were in a lot of pain, if you'd been in an accident, you could say to your wife, I've said in my healthcare directive, I've told you, limit the pain medication so I can have a conversation with you and not be totally out of it on pain meds, but then have them give me pain medication right after I am able to talk to you. A lot of people make this choice because they want to be lucid enough, so they're willing to be in a little bit of pain or a lot of pain so they can talk, because the heavy pain medication makes you really loopy. But a pulsed form, if it says selective treatment, and it's very clearly indicated what that is, they will often go to the durable power of attorney for healthcare or the spouse to ask what decisions they think would want made, because it's really hard to think through every scenario. So a pulse form will give the ER or the ER and the paramedics instruction on this person doesn't want everything, get to a family member, get to a durable power of attorney. That's kind of how those things work together. But the pulse form overrides what's written in a healthcare directive. If you have that and it says comfort only, they will abide by comfort only. So it's, again, the reason for Worry-Free Wednesday, update your forms, make sure they talk to each other. And if you have a pulse form, make sure it corresponds to what you've told your power of attorney for healthcare and what's in your living will. A lot of people don't want to fill these out because they're afraid. They just feel like, oh my God, if I write it down and then that happens, what if the scenario is different? Which is why, as Kay said, choosing the right person who really knows you is really the first and best thing to do. You've been such a patient and great audience. Thank you so much. If you have questions, we will be here. Please join it. On our website, final slide. On our website, worryfreewednesdays.com. You can email me anytime at info@worryfreewednesdays.com. We love picking up the phone and talking to people. We love meeting you in person. We can do it over Zoom. We have many other workshops. Our events are listed there. We're here to help. There's 6 of us, and we are all semi-retired out of our professional jobs, and we do this as a passion and a gift to the community to just keep people educated and able to have a good end of life. So thank you very much.